Welcome to the Bare Marriage Podcast. I'm Sheila Ray Gregoire from ToLoveHonorAndVacuum.com, where we like to talk about healthy, evidence-based biblical advice for your marriage and your sex life. And I am joined today by my daughter, Rebecca Lindenbach.
Hello.
I'm hoping we're just going to have fun today, Becca.
This is one that I have been talking about on walks for a long time.
Yes, what we do is we go on walks.
Because I have two kids.
With my grandkids, her kids, and we just rant.
Yes.
And this is something which is your favorite rant.
Yes, and we have to do this all in code at this point because I have a verbal son.
Right.
But, okay, I have a theory that I believe has been pretty proven at this point. Mm-hmm. That, first of all, I want to explain what a yes space is.
Okay.
Before I get into this. So, I'm a parent, have a toddler and a baby. There's this Montessori concept of creating a yes space for your children, which means, in essence, you're not constantly running after them saying, don't touch that. No, not there. Don't touch that. That's not for you. Right? Mm-hmm. So, any cabinets they can't go into have a baby lock on it. Everything is like at their level, so they don't have to climb dangerously to go get things. Mm-hmm. In essence, it's an environment that is created so that they can't fail. Right. So, and it's been a fantastic way of doing parenting for our family.
Okay, so you give your kids a yes space so they get to do what they want and explore and they can't fail.
Yeah, in essence, it's an environment that is entirely curated to the child. Mm-hmm. It's incredibly inconvenient for everyone else, but it's perfect for the kid.
And it reduces the amount of time that you spend
saying no.
And you don't have to follow along after them quite so much.
Exactly.
Right. So it's good. Yeah.
I think evangelical sex advice, the goal is to create a yes space for men.
Okay.
But not just sex advice, like just marriage, life in general. Its design is to be a yes space for men. So men never have to hear no.
Right. And on today's podcast, what we want to do is we're just going to talk about this. This isn't highly scripted.
No.
Becca and I, we missed the podcast where we just get to talk because the last few have been heavy and we've had to do a lot of research for them, like the stats ones.
Yeah.
And so this is just us venting and ranting and having some fun. We need some fun. We've been really tired the last few months.
Been exhausted.
Yes, getting our manuscript in for She Deserves Better. And so in June, I said, Becca, I just want to talk about stuff that I want to talk about. Mm-hmm. And so June on the blog, we're doing libido.
Yeah.
What wrecks a woman's libido, what to do when she has the higher libido, like all these things. Like, let's just talk about libido. And that's all leading up to the re-release of our Boost Your Libido course.
Yes.
Which will happen at the end of the month, which is exciting. We're putting the final touches on that. But yeah, I just want to get to talking about the things that we're both really passionate about and that we find fun to talk about. And one of those today is yes spaces. Have we created yes spaces for men when it comes to sex advice and marriage advice?
So should we tell them about why I started talking about this?
Sure. Okay. Let's go for it.
So back in October, Married Sex by Gary Thomas and Deb Felita was released.
Right.
And as we've already discussed multiple times, there are some problematic or cringy or just flat out erotic elements in that book, which are very uncomfortable.
Yes, we did a podcast about the weird erotica. I'll put a link into that.
Yeah.
There's also the weird postpartum stuff about how she gets aroused giving him handjobs postpartum. We recorded that one when you were 4 weeks postpartum.
4 days, I think.
No, 2 weeks. You were very postpartum.
I was postpartum. I don't know. It's all a blur. It's all a blur of pads and nipple cream. Okay. Yeah. Anyway, but he wrote this little excerpt, and I mean, I guess a warning. It's also very erotic because it's far more descriptive than it needs to be. So again, if you're someone who struggles, I just know we have a lot of people who struggle with erotica and erotic content who listen. So maybe just skip ahead about.
Or just read it in a very not erotic voice.
Okay. Should I read it as a British school mom?
Okay.
All right. You can create all kinds of different experiences. You've soaked up behind him in the shower, and one hand is going up his abdomen while the other is busy down below. You're lying next to him and start stroking his face while your other hand is stroking something much farther south. He's lying on the bed, and one of your hands is busy on his shaft while another hand is using a soft scarf or even a makeup brush on his testicles.
And the makeup brush on his testicles thing went quite viral on Facebook.
Yeah, because people were just like, my makeup brushes? Really? First of all, I do want to say, I have zero, like, none of us have zero problem if a couple wants to, like, do sensory play stuff.
Yeah, but the way to write it is very different.
Yeah, like, we even, in our orgasm course, we talk about how you can use sensory play to help arouse and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, you can, find things that are soft, find, even if you did it in a list, right? Yeah. Like makeup brushes, silk ties, feathers, use them on your genital area, the nipples, whatever. You can use lists, and then it's fine. You're not painting an erotic it's just odd.
It is odd. But here's the thing. This is coming in a book, which the entire point of the book, women have been told, make sure that you have sex with them even if you don't want to, because the way that you wake up with your baby in the middle of the night, he also needs sex. So make sure you're giving him sex, and make sure that it's the hottest sex you can possibly imagine, because that's what God wants you to do. And make sure that you're showing him your boobs enough, and make sure
you flash your boobs.
Make sure that you're sending him, and he doesn't make sure, but you can send him sexy photos so that he's neurologically more likely to not want to look at other women.
Right.
Like, there's all these things that women have to do to make life ridiculously easy and sex-filled for men. And then he even takes women's makeup brushes.
Yes.
The thing that many women use to make themselves feel feminine and have some me time in the morning when they're like, I have a long day ahead of me, but I am going to look good. And even that, it's like, put it on his balls.
Yes.
So, like, it's just so entitled in...
Yeah,
it would be one thing to say, hey, side note, staph infections are a thing, so please don't use something that's going to go on your wife's eyes on your ball sack.
I know. Like, it's interesting. He's mentioning a soft scarf or a makeup brush on his testicles. So soft scarf, he doesn't say soft tie or silk tie. He says soft scarf. Like, or even pocket, like a silk
square.
A silk pocket square. Like he has silky soft things that you could use on his testicles, but no, you're supposed to take something that's expensive that she owns.
Yeah, exactly.
And put it on his testicles.
It's like, and I think this is something where when I read this, what came to mind for me is, it's just that men literally feel entitled to use literally anything in the house, even if it belongs to their spouse, for their own sexual pleasure.
Yeah,
because everything is a sexual yes space for men. If this had been written, we're like, hey, you know what? If you want to try something spicy, go to the dollar store after work, pick up some little makeup brushes, like go to the fabric store, find some fabrics that you find nice and soft and try out different things. That, zero problems.
Yeah.
But there's this pervasive mentality that everything is fair game for him. To the point that our marriage bestsellers and sex bestsellers literally don't even use the word consent.
Yes.
Like, it's so much a yes space for men. Women don't even need to say yes for men to have sex.
And again, in our book, The Great Sex Rescue, we surveyed 20,000 women to find out which evangelical messages hurt or helped women's marital and sexual satisfaction. And we reviewed the top 10 marriage bestsellers and 6 iconic sex books. And in those books, the word consent was never mentioned. It was, however, mentioned in the top-selling secular book that was our control book.
Because secular people do tend to understand that, you are not entitled to someone else's body, even if you are married to them. Because that's called rape.
Yes. And so again, we are not against using makeup brushes any way you want to use them. Feathers, like, seriously, have fun, explore. The problem is when you just assume that he can take something that is hers that is really expensive.
Yeah, makeup brushes are expensive. When we've created this culture where sex is seen as something that is for men, not for women, how something affects women can just simply not be thought.
Yeah.
It can just be completely out of your mind, right? No one thinks this, how is this going to affect the woman involved, right?
Yeah, it's only about his penis.
No, testicles. His balls.
Well, a shaft. Well, you got the silk scarf on his shaft. Oh, no, you're right. The silk scarf and makeup brush are both on the testicles.
Yes,
yeah.
yes.
Yeah. And, like, again, like, dry cleaning costs. Like, these things, these things should be thought of.
And also, like, again, we don't mean to be nitpicky, but, like, the problem for me is not that they don't mention literally every single thing. Is that they don't have this in just like a bullet point list of things to idea. It's like he is actively, it seems to me as the reader that the goal reading through this, if you read the paragraphs before and after too, is that the goal is to get you aroused so that you like the idea of doing this. And so if you get a guy reading a book actively aroused, what is he going to do? He's going to go to the bathroom and then try it out.
Yeah.
Right? Versus if it was just a list where it's like, some things you can try for sensory play. Feathers, makeup brushes, silk scarves. Like, that's not going to be like, I have to do this right now.
Yeah.
I must
and
do the
cheap
sex
makeup
thing.
brushes. I would have specified cheap makeup brushes.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly. But like, the problem is like, this is written in a way where it's like, I could totally see someone just going and being like, I have to try this right now.
And yeah, and in the very next paragraph, so this, in the context of this, is he's teaching women how to give a hand job. And in the very next paragraph, I'll just read it. It's difficult to describe how grateful your husband can be for something special every now and then, unasked for but eagerly given, whether it's a part of foreplay or an act on its own. Growing in your understanding of how his penis responds to your touch is a key to his heart and will often create a husband who is so happy he married you, it will be difficult for him not to brag to his friends about why.
And I will say, Gary's been called out for that particular line.
Yeah.
And he responded to it saying like, well, it was just a joke. It's just a saying. It's not an okay saying. It's not an okay joke.
Because this makes sex not a safe space for women.
No, that is so gross.
As soon as you're insinuating that he is going to tell his friends.
Or he's going to want
to. Or he's going to want to tell his friends about the intimate details of your sex life, the sex is no longer a safe space for her.
No, it's because you're a porn star then.
Yeah.
It's because it's like, oh my gosh, you won't believe how hot my wife is.
And again, in the same book, he says, he praises women who send boudoir
Naked
photos
photos,
and naked photos, because then neurologically their husbands will be drawn to their naked bodies instead.
Which is absolute bullcrap, by the way.
Yeah, not scientific, and actually it's a big misunderstanding, because when you objectify women,
guess what? It leads to more objectification of women.
Yeah. Okay. So, but this is taking away the safe space for women, and as we're talking about libido this month, this is what I want us to see: is there's so many ways in which we make sex not a safe space for women, and yet we do make it a safe space for men, and then we wonder why women don't want sex.
Yeah. And again, not safe space, a yes space. They're two different things. It should be a safe space for both. A yes space is different than a safe space.
Yes, I am sorry.
Because the point of a yes space is that you're supposed to grow out of it. So like a year ago, we had a lot more cupboards locked than we do now, because Alexander has learned there are some things that I'm not allowed to touch.
Right.
But like when he was 1.5, he didn't have that capacity to know. Right. We have some things that he can now have access to that he couldn't before, because he's now safer. The thing is that it seems that for men in these books, they never have to grow. Like, for example, let's talk about the infamous love and respect example.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, let's take it outside of sex now. Okay. So love and respect, Emerson Eggers tells this just bafflingly awful example of his own marriage.
And he uses it several times in the book. Like, he
really
actually
bizarre.
brings it up like 3 different times, and apparently
like, he's
it's in the
proud
video.
of this?
Yeah, apparently it's in the video series too, so they use this as an illustration quite
And
a lot.
I just look at this and I'm like, wow, what a man-child. Like, when I look, anyway, so what he tells this story about how, he leaves wet towels on the bed, and he and his sons can't even be bothered to put their trash in the trash bin and throw it from across the room.
Candy wrappers on the floor, crumbs on the counter, wet towels on the bed.
But like the candy wrappers were beside the trash can. Like, they just threw it and couldn't be bothered to walk 5 feet and put it in the garbage can because, mom will pick it up. Right? And so then, of course, Sarah Egrich talks to Emerson Egrich about this and says, hey, can you stop putting your wet towels on the bed? Don't put your wet towels on the bed. Please pick up your garbage. Please, wipe off the counter when you're done. Just very basic things. And the response that Egrich has is she goes away for a week, and when she comes back, she says, do you miss me? And he and the boys were like, well, it was nice to not be nagged all the time. So in essence, it was like, no, we didn't miss you because you're just such a nag for asking us to do literally what my 2-year-old is now taught to do. He puts things in the garbage can and he puts his towel in the hamper. Yeah. My 2-year-old does this. This is not hard stuff. And so this is the problem, is we're expecting men to be able to do whatever the heck they want, never ever actually grow, and women have to pick up the slack. Because the moral of that story was Sarah learned how to be more respectful, and she just took care of it because it wasn't that big a deal anyway. And she stopped asking.
And remember, too, he was encouraging his sons to disrespect their mother because the sons were doing the same thing, and they had fun when Sarah was away, and then she learned not to ask him or the sons to clean up after themselves. So this
comes from childhood. This starts super young.
So, and this is, again, this is the biggest used marriage study in North American churches is teaching men that it's okay to leave wet towels on the bed and you can get upset at your wife if she asks you to stop. Like, I can't think of a better example of a yes space. So he gets to do whatever he wants, even if it inconveniences the wife, and she's not allowed to speak up about it.
Yep. And by the way, again, yes spaces are not supposed to be for like teenagers.
Yes.
They're not supposed to be for older children. Yes spaces are for infants and toddlers and like very, very young children.
Yeah.
And so the fact that these men who want to have complete control over their wives, who want to be the leaders of the family, who want to like have all the authority in the church are also like, and by the way, everything has to revolve around me and my balls. Like, it's just ridiculous. It's like, which one is it? You get to choose one.
And then at the same time, they wonder why women have no libido.
Yes.
Okay, so
Like, what the fuck?
okay, so let's take the wet towels thing, and we're gonna move. It's a similar story. To go back to married sex, there's another really good example.
Oh my gosh, yes.
So this is from a section of the book where they're talking about making sex into a routine and prioritizing it more. And here's how the section starts. Erica has 4 young children, and she calls her care for them a 24-hour-a-day job. Her husband, Timothy, helps, but he works outside the home, which means decisions throughout the day tend to fall on her shoulders alone. Becca, would you please reread the first phrase there?
Erica has 4 young children.
Was it an immaculate conception, Becca?
All 4 of them. This is the most infuriating thing. This is so infuriating. And also, I love how the subtle passive aggressive, she calls her care for them a 24-hour job. Timothy helps, so it's not really a 24-hour job, but she thinks it's a 24. She calls it a 24-hour job.
But again, okay, it is not helping to look after your own children.
Oh, I agree. But look at how passive aggressive this whole thing is. Erica had the children. It was her choice, and she thinks it's a 24-hour day job, even though her husband helps. Silly Erica. Well, poor Timothy's married to Erica with 4 kids who can't keep up with them, even though it's her job. And Timothy works outside the house and does more than his fair share because he's helping when he comes home.
And the way this is framed is that the couple isn't having enough sex.
Yeah. And again, I don't know if that's how Gary actually sees it, but this is so common of a mentality that it's the woman's job, and wow, what a great guy if you do more than your 9 to 5. So it doesn't matter what Gary wanted to write here.
And one of the big issues with yes spaces, so he actually goes in, for the next couple of paragraphs, he actually goes in and explains mental load a little bit, which he does not in a bad way.
Yeah.
Like, he explains how Erica is carrying all of the mental load of all the decisions for the family.
Yeah, he doesn't use the word mental load.
No, and this is causing her to really lose her libido. And so they were talking about how, to help her look forward to sex. Because she's the problem here, because she's not looking forward to sex. So it's like, how do we get her to boost her libido to start looking forward to sex? And what they come up with is he is going to take on all of the mental load for one day on Fridays so that they can have more sex. And we're going to get to that in a second. I know there's a lot you want to say about that. But I just want to talk about the concept of mental load here for a minute. Because one of the big ways, and the person who really popularized this was Eve Rodsky in her book Fair Play. Really good book. I looked at that in a whole month. I think it was almost 2 years ago now. I think it was one of the biggest series we've ever done on the blog, and people love it. I will put a link to the Mental Load podcast and the post there. But she said the point isn't to get everybody doing 50% of the stuff, or even to try to make sure that everyone's doing an equal amount of everything. That's not how you do it. Every family is different. You're all going to be dividing things up. The way that you tell whether you're doing this well is if both people have roughly the same amount of time available to sit down and do nothing. Okay, so it's not how much you're doing that you need to equalize, it's how much downtime you have that you need to equalize. Like, if a guy has the ability to just sit down at night and do nothing, that's a privilege, that's a yes space that she doesn't have quite often. Now, she may. Okay, you may be in a household where she does. But if she's running around getting all of the lunches packed for tomorrow's school, and if she's doing the evening dishes, and he's just sitting there doing very little, that means your life is set up for him to have a yes space. Like the whole house is a yes space for him. He gets to do what he wants, whereas she doesn't get to do what she wants. And I think a lot of men think that women want to do this stuff.
Yeah.
Because women do it. And men don't necessarily do stuff they don't want to do.
Yeah, and women spend their time on YouTube looking at meal planning videos and watching house cleaning TikToks. And because it's not because like in an ideal world what I would spend my life doing is meal planning and cleaning. It's just that because we've internalized that someone has to do it and we know the men aren't going to.
Now, some people really love doing this. Some people feel this is their calling. That is no problem at all.
Yeah.
Okay,
we're all incredibly jealous of you.
I actually really love cooking.
Yes.
I really, really love cooking. This is my time, and no one's allowed to bug me.
But you
when I'm
even
cooking.
found it more stressful than when you had 2 kids.
Yes, I did. I really enjoy it a lot more when I'm doing it for
a lot
myself
of this
now.
stuff is stage of life stuff too.
Yes. So no one is saying that if you have fun organizing your house, that's weird. I actually do have fun organizing my house.
I personally enjoy meal planning.
Yeah. So none of that is saying that. But the point is, if one of you has the ability to sit down and do nothing while the other one doesn't, then there's an uneven distribution of load there.
Yeah.
And quite often, she is carrying most of that load.
And the way that we know that is there are lots of studies that have come out that have shown that even among households where both people work equal amount of hours outside of the house, the woman tends to still do about 70% of the at-home work. I think it's something like women on average do, I can't remember how many hours exactly it is, but it's almost a full additional workday worth of labor more than their spouse does a week.
Yeah. And interestingly, here's a fun stat from the book that we just wrote, She Deserves Better, which is coming out next spring. We looked at beliefs in teenagehood and how that affects how you act today. And when women believe, or when teenage girls believe girls talk too much, which is a really, it's a measure of what we call internalized misogyny. So when you think that boys are better than girls,
boys deserve more than girls.
That boys deserve more than girls. Multiple studies, academic studies have shown this is a really good measure of internalized misogyny. When you believe that as a girl, if you grow up and get married and you both work outside the home, you are, I think it's like twice as likely to do all of the housework.
Yeah, we don't know the exact number, so you are more likely.
You are more likely.
More likely.
Yeah.
Might be.
I can never remember the stats. I know I know that it was very telling, and we put it in the book. And so, like, when you believe that men deserve more than women, then that plays out, and you treat yourself as less important, and so you will do a lot more of the labor and not expected of your husband.
Yeah, and the reason I think we've gotten in this situation is we had for generations and generations and generations a situation where a woman's job was to take care of the home and the man's job was to go out and make a living and bring it home, right? And it wasn't really fair back then either.
Yep.
But that's how life was, and everyone's saying, well, it's your job and it's his job, and just kind of deal with it.
There's actually a lot of literature that says that 150 years ago, men were far more involved in parenting.
Yes, that's true, but in America in the 50s and 60s.
But like...
And it's not generations and generations and generations.
Yeah.
It's like 3 generations.
It was actually a post-World War II phenomenon. Yeah. Because what happened was in the 1800s, most families had either a family farm or a family business.
More homesteading kind of situation.
Yeah, or you owned the post office.
Or you were all blacksmiths.
And so dads were often a lot more involved with the kids.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is we had this cultural time where things were much more segregated based on gender in terms of household duties. And then women entered the workforce, and what should have happened was men should have taken on more quote-unquote women's tasks. But that didn't happen. It didn't happen.
Yeah.
Instead, there was pressure to be awesome boss babe plus a perfect mom.
Right.
Plus a perfect homemaker.
Right.
And instead, women just took on even more load on their shoulders.
Yep.
And that's a problem. And so when we see things like this Timothy and Erica,
or even in places where she doesn't work outside the home, which that was my story. I worked in the home, but I didn't work outside the home. That's your story. That's Joanna's story. Like so you see Erica has 4 young kids. Timothy somehow doesn't. I don't know why Erica has 4 young kids. Anyway, so Erica and Timothy have 4 young children.
Yeah.
And she's the primary caregiver because she's home. And that's fine. I was the primary caregiver.
Yeah, I love being the primary caregiver.
There is nothing wrong with I think that's ideal.
Yeah.
Honestly, if someone can be the primary caregiver.
Don't care if it's the man or the woman.
No, but I think it's ideal if somebody can. And I think it's sad that housing prices are so high that often you need 2 incomes today. Anyway, but the idea shouldn't be that when Timothy cares for his kids, he's helping because he is the father. He's supposed to be caring for the kids.
Yeah, it's like, no, being a family is a 24-hour-a-day job.
Yeah.
And some people spend 8 of those hours at work.
Yeah.
And they spend the other 16 hours at home helping. doing their bit. And you're both helping. The mom's helping and the dad's helping because you're both helping the end goal of taking care of your family.
Right.
And so both of them have 24-hour day jobs. It's just that only one of them feels the weight of it. And one of them is willing to slack off. And this is the problem. So then the solution that to this mental load situation that this couple comes up with may very well be working for them, by the way. Not casting judgment on this couple. I'm casting judgment on how this might affect other couples. Okay?
Yeah, the way that this is presented.
Yeah.
So the idea is, they're encouraging the couple to have what they call simmering sex, so that she is going to spend all day
on
Fridays thinking about the great sex that they're going to have that night.
Yeah.
And the way that this happens, do you want to go into
Yeah,
it?
sure. So the way that this happens is they say that, Timothy takes his job to be to separate her from all parenting decisions and household duties as much as possible on Fridays. Which I'm like, that's actually a great practice. To take to have it scheduled where it's like someone's job to take care of everything so they know what's going on. I think that's a great practice.
Right.
I have a real problem with it only being so that he can get some nookie.
Yes.
I have a real problem with that being, because the problem wasn't that, anyway, I'll explain what happened, then I'll talk about my problems with it. So, in essence, what they say is that, so now Erica gets to take a few more minutes in her shower in the morning to, think some sensual thoughts or make it more sensual. She focuses on what she's wearing during the day, underneath her clothes and on the outside as well. She and Timothy started sharing some text messages and even on occasion a photo or two. Once again, make sure you're sending sexy photos.
Yep.
Like, again, it's just really problematic how often sexy photos are just thrown in there. Like, this is what healthy Christian couples do.
Yeah.
And if you don't, are you really hot enough?
Yeah,
like,
that's not,
do you
if you want to do that, go for it. We're not saying there's anything wrong.
No.
We think there's a huge problem with pressuring couples
and
or
also,
suggesting that this is the ideal because there are such major safety issues.
And also they do mention a safety issue in an asterisk in the footnotes, whereas all the benefits are in the text, blaring and very, I found it very pressuring to read. I'll just say that. Okay. Anyway. What then they end up doing as well is Timothy would come home a little bit early on Fridays to help with household duties. So he'd take charge so that she could have a couple hours without having to make any decisions. He said things took a huge step forward when he started bringing dinner home without asking Erica what she wanted. Right?
Okay.
And so there's all these things. And then at the end of the day, in essence, she's so relaxed that they can have sex and they feel really great about it and she enjoys the sex finally. And it's all great for them. Here's where I have major, major problems. Like, this made me angry when I read it, okay? This is a Band-Aid on a problem that should not exist.
Right.
Having kids is stressful, okay? Connor and I have a very balanced marriage in terms of work. I can leave the children and he knows where the diapers are. He knows how to clean everything properly. He actually does some things better than I do. I do some things better than he does. But I don't need to worry about him not knowing how to do things. He can meal plan like nothing else. He actually meal plans healthier than I do. Like, we are very balanced. It is still incredibly stressful and draining to have children.
Yeah.
So I can't imagine being in a marriage where this man understands how much work it is and then only takes it on one night a week, even though the whole weekend is coming up when he's not at work.
Yeah.
And additionally, what I just wonder is how long until him helping out on Fridays in order to get sex, which is transactional sex. Let's be honest, because he stops getting sex. Is he going to still keep doing this? Because the reason he's doing this is so that she can have sex on Fridays.
Yeah, so that she can get in the mental headspace
to have sex.
To enjoy sex, to think about sex, to have this simmering sex.
This story is not, they went to see a counselor. Timothy understood how much was on his wife's plate, and he said, holy crap, I am dropping the ball. I am so sorry that I have failed you like this.
Yeah.
And then he took on more, and as a natural response, her libido heightened. That's not the moral of the story. The moral of the story is your wife doesn't want sex. Make sure you bring home pizza on Fridays. And make sure you take care of the kids and do bedtime once a week. That's literally, because Gary puts a caveat here that says, guys, don't assume that your wife's hindrances are identical to Erica's. Maybe your wife doesn't mind making decisions and would be offended if you didn't ask her opinion about what to bring home for dinner. I have a thought on that as well. Maybe kissing her kids goodnight puts her in the mood to connect with the father of those children. The key is to figure out what turns on your spouse and what turns them off, and then start to simmer accordingly. And I have thoughts on this, because here's the thing. This means that his idea of what Timothy was doing was putting his kids to bed, picking up dinner, and I guess cleaning out the lunch boxes and doing literally 1/7. And one of the easier days, because the kids are at school. Like, Saturdays are really hard. Sundays are really hard. What's he doing then? What's he doing then? And also, the idea that, like, women are just this crazy people who they get so offended. You bring the wrong thing home and they get so offended. It's like, women are not insane. If they're mad or offended, there's probably a reason. Like, maybe you've been bothering her about how she needs to, like, get healthy and you need to get healthy, and then you bring home KFC.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
or maybe you're trying to get your kids to eat more vegetables and you bring home pepperoni pizza or something.
Yeah. Or maybe you bring home something that one of your kids really doesn't like to eat, and so now she's going to be dealing with the temper tantrum. Or maybe she's stressed out about money and you go home and bring a whole thing of Chinese food instead of making a $10 meal from scratch at home because you can't be bothered to figure out how to cook.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Okay? So also, I'm sorry, this thing bothers me. Okay, this is the whole idea of the yes spaces for men. It's like, wow, you get such a pat on the back for bringing home takeout. You know what happens if a woman brings home some freaking takeout once in a while? She gets told you didn't do enough. She gets told, haven't you thought about the budget? She gets told, but does there enough vegetables in that? What happens if a man brings home takeout on the one freaking night that he is supposed to cook?
Yeah.
What a great husband. You better reward him in bed, honey. Wow, what an amazing dude. He can order a pizza.
Yeah.
What an amazing guy. He's got Uber Eats on his phone. What a fantastic dad. You know what a fantastic dad freaking does?
Yeah.
He actually knows how to do things to take care of his kids. Again, there is nothing wrong with your job being to pick up pizza on Friday nights if that's what you've decided. Yeah. But this, and again, that might be great for Timothy and Erica. I don't care about their couple. What I care about is the women who are drowning because everyone's on a budget, okay? You can't afford to order in multiple times a week if you're a normal family. And so if the husband is in charge of one meal a week and he gets to do the expensive one,
yeah.
What the freaking heck?
Then she never gets to order in on her nights where she's supposed to cook.
Yeah. You know what we do in our family? Whoever cooks the most nights that week gets to decide if we're going to order out or not.
Yeah.
And the other person has to cook. That's what we do. Yeah. Okay? Connor cooks on weekends and I cook during the week, and when we switch off for work, when Connor's on and I'm working, then he cooks during the week and he gets to decide if we order in on Wednesdays and I cook on the weekends. Okay? That's pretty darn fair. Not everyone has to do that. But the reason that we did that was because we understood that the mental load of ordering a pizza is almost nothing.
Right.
There's no dishes. Like, there's no decisions really to be made.
And remember, too, like, if someone orders in when there's stuff in the fridge that needs to get eaten today, or there's leftovers that need to get eaten today, or you're trying to use up the food that's in the fridge just as a budget thing, and someone orders in, that actually can end up costing you more than just the cost of the meal.
Again, for Eric and Timothy, if the news is going to happen every Friday, might not be an issue.
Right.
But this is what's said so often to couples, is he's such a great husband that he brought you home food from work. Yeah.
There was a really funny post by a blog, The Generous Husband, who often does really.
Oh my word! This killed me.
So he does these. It's not worth reading. It honestly isn't. It's quite
misogynistic.
It's quite a slanted view of sex in men's favor. But he did this really funny post on Thanksgiving, like on the Thursday before Thanksgiving, where it says, "Guys, your wife is going to be so busy tomorrow cooking. Be a hero for her and order pizza tonight.
Not do all the dishes. Not." Yeah. Ask her how you can help.
Not be involved in cooking the turkey tomorrow.
Yeah, not say, you know what, honey, you do this every year. And you know what? I'm a capable grown adult who can Google. And I'm going to take care of the turkey this year. And if it fails, it's on me.
Yeah.
But, that's not what he does. He's like, order a pizza the night before. Not even cook a meal for your wife so that, she can relax and you make her favorite meal for her to say thank you for the work that she's going to do.
So and so all of this is to say that so much of our advice, we don't even realize how slanted it is towards men. Like Erica has 4 children. I can't imagine anything that is more slanted in men's favor. So the kids are hers, and it's expected that she is going to care for the kids. Yeah. And
he can't even be expected to cook a meal.
And when he brings home dinner one night a week, this is an amazing thing. Again, I have no problem with a woman taking on primary role of caregiving. Like I said, I did that, you did that, Joanna's doing that. We're all in favor of that. I loved that. It was the favorite thing I've ever done in my life. Okay, so
I feel really privileged to be able to. I know not everyone can, even people who really want to. Like that's a privilege. That's not a judgment thing. That's a
Yes.
Some people have the privilege to do it and some people don't.
Right. So we're not saying that. We're just saying that how you tell whether everything is done to the benefit of both and that you're not favoring one is whether both of you have equal downtime.
But I also would say, like, I know that's Eve's thing. Yeah. I think I do want to add another one.
Okay.
It's only equal if everyone can do every task.
Yes, I would agree. You have to be able to step in.
Yeah. Because even if Connor and I both have 2 hours off every evening, say we do, we don't. Say we both have 2 hours off every evening, okay? Mm-hmm. Then if I know that, like, my spouse can't handle a lot of the daily tasks or doesn't know how to do it, so it's going to be more work for me if I leave, I can never leave. Mm-hmm. Right? Like, I'm tied down. Even if I have free time, I'm tied down. Mm-hmm. I know for me, that was what was so psychologically difficult about nursing. Yeah. Right? Like, when I can go 3 hours between nursing sessions, it is a game changer for me. Right. Because I'm not tied down in the same way anymore. And then when my kid weans, that's going to be amazing as well. I love nursing, but goodness, I'm looking forward to having my life back. But this is what happens over and over again is we've created this culture where what's most important is that men have it easy. Mm-hmm. And we see this over and over again. We see this in that really just stupid Gospel Coalition Instagram reel about how wives, you need to support your husband so he can do the risky work of being a husband and a leader, of getting the kids ready for church. Yeah. And I'm like,
but she's already doing that. The insinuation is she is doing that on her own. If you want him to do it, she has to respect him. So the idea is women are always the default, but we need to create these yes spaces for men. Yeah. So let's turn this back to sex for a minute, because I have quite a few more things I want to say about sex. Okay. The other big yes space, big yes space we have when it comes to sex is orgasm. Yes. In that it's always assumed that he is going to have an orgasm.
And it's not assumed that she will, but it is assumed. Right. So the difference in a yes space and it just being about him is that it is assumed that she will make sure he gets an orgasm, but it is not assumed the other way. That's how we know that it's a yes space for men, because he can go into sex knowing she's going to do it for him without feeling the pressure to do it for her.
So again, 47-point orgasm gap that we found, right? 95% of men almost always reach orgasm compared to just over 48% of women. So let's see how this plays out. There was a huge war in the comment section on the blog probably about 2 years ago, and I turned it into a post where what I was arguing is that we need to make sure that she reaches orgasm, okay? And whatever it takes for her to get there should be the priority because he's going to reach orgasm anyway. And he said... This man was arguing that this was slanted towards women.
Yeah, this is really unfair.
If you're going to be fair, half the time you should do what she wants and half the time you should do what he wants. Yes. So, and I kept pointing out, if you do that, he orgasms 100% of the time and she orgasms 50% of the time.
Yeah, that's not fair.
That's not fair. But he was arguing that if we always do what she wants, he orgasms 100% of the time and she orgasms 100% of the time, and that's slanted towards women.
Yeah, because again, the point of all the advice that we've been given, even from as young as when we're dating, and we're told you need to put on the brakes because he can't be expected to. Literally, a man is not expected to be able to say no, even from as young as 13 years old on his first date. Yes. Okay? Like, this starts early. Men are taught to be entitled, because that is what a yes space is. Toddlers are allowed to be entitled. My son is allowed to be entitled to a safe space for him. He's 2.5 years old. He's not old enough to consider other people's perspectives yet. Right. You know, he's allowed to be entitled. Yeah. A 28-year-old man is not allowed to be entitled. Yes. But this happens so early, as these men are raised to believe I should never have to sacrifice pleasure or anything that I want or fun for the well-being of my spouse. It's only good if it's also good for me. Yeah. In the perfect way. So unless I'm getting 100%, it's not okay. It's not okay for me to get 80% and for her to get 80%. It has to be 100%, and her getting 40% is better than both of us getting 80%. Yeah. And that is a major problem. That is a major problem. And this is something that I hear from so many people, even the people on the blog where, you know, we hear from women who say, I really don't want to use hormonal birth control because it makes me really, really ill. Yeah. You know, it makes me feel terrible, but he won't use a condom because it makes sex not feel as good for him. Yeah. And so I'm on the pill and I have no libido and I'm depressed and suicidal. And it's like, okay, for pity's sake, men.
Yes.
Like,
yeah. Condoms do not take away pleasure very much.
No,
it takes away minimum sensation. I have a friend who is slightly older than me, who went through cancer treatment recently. And when they went through cancer treatment, he had to start using condoms again because which they hadn't done for like 30 years. And he's like, the difference today is unbelievable. Yeah. Like you can barely feel them.
Like they're not plastic.
Because when you have radiation, you just need to, as that's what their doctor was recommending. And he couldn't believe how different they are. But
the idea that men will not even take a marginal decrease in pleasure, convenience, or fun in order to drastically change their wife's experience. Yeah. And that's what I have a major problem with. Yeah. I just have this major problem because it's so unnecessary. Yeah. It's so unnecessary. I do not believe that men are inherently less competent, less capable, or less altruistic than women.
No, they don't.
I do not believe that. And we've been socialized to create a universe in which men don't have to be any of those things. They don't actually have to be as competent as they could be because there's always a woman to pick up the slack. They don't actually have to be as altruistic as they could be because, well, she's going to take care of you anyway, and she's not going to leave because she's been socialized not to.
Yeah. Yeah.
And again, I know a lot of people, especially men who think that we hate men, which there are many of them who think that, are going to say this is incredibly unfair. You know, it's not right for him to have to give up stuff, right? Like this isn't ridiculous. You can find another way. I'm like, okay, say that you're working as a server in a restaurant, okay? And it's you and two other people who are supposed to split up the tips at the end, and the manager hands out the tips. And there's $40 of tips. You're supposed to get about $13. You don't know this. And the manager has a crush on you and gives you $20 of tips and gives the other two people who they find ugly only $10 of tips.
Right.
Right? It's not about your performance. It's not about anything. It's just about how they're just going to give it to you. Yeah. And then you find out this is happening and your coworkers find out this is happening. What's the fair thing to do? The fair thing to do is to only take your share of the tips and to actually probably pay back the other ones who you took their rightful money that they worked for. Yeah. You know, you took it. You didn't know that you did. But it was unfair. It's going to feel painful when you've gotten used to privilege. If your budget had an extra $7 a shift that you're no longer going to have, you know, it's going to feel unfair because you never should have been given that extra $7 in the first place.
What's that quote? When you're used to privilege, equality feels like oppression.
Yeah, exactly. But the thing is that you were never actually entitled to the extra $7. You were given that even though it wasn't yours.
Yeah.
It was never yours. And so it was never your entitlement to be in a situation where even if you and your spouse both work outside the home, you always come home to a home-cooked meal and you never do the home cooking. It's not an entitlement to always have laundry folded and put away for you and never to do the laundry yourself. You are not entitled to always have sex the exact way that you want it, the exact way that you want right now, and to use whatever you want, even if it belongs to your wife, to make it spicier. You're not entitled to that, you know? Now, that doesn't mean any of those things are bad.
Yeah.
It might work for your family that one person does the cooking. Again, but it's not an entitlement. And you don't get brownie points for taking on what you would have to do on your own if you were a single person. And that's what I'm trying to say is, why is it that our Christian men are expected to do less than single men who are living in bachelor pads? Okay, there are so many studies that show that when women get married, they take on more labor, and when men get married, they reduce the amount of labor they do.
Yep.
This is a systemic issue.
And again, I know we're talking about mental load, but we're framing this about libido this month. We're trying to figure out why women have no libido. Think about this stuff.
Exactly.
Think about this stuff. Okay, yeah. I want to keep on the sex thing. For a sec.
I'm sorry I keep on going off track. It's just the mental load thing is so tied into libido.
It honestly is. I think it's the biggest. I think it is the biggest element for so many women. Okay, but here's another example. So the guy who was arguing that we should do sex half the time what he wants and half the time what she wants, even though he's going to orgasm all the time. Yeah. Another way this plays out is in the conversation about oral sex. And I find this all the time. I want to read to you, and I'm just going to warn you, this is a terrible quote. Okay, so this might be triggering for some. This is Mark Driscoll.
A boy Mark.
And you know what? We could have beaten up on him more in the Great Sex Rescue.
He's so bad.
We deliberately decided not to because we thought he was done. Yeah. Like, we thought, well, he's been disgraced. You know, he was fired from Mars Hill.
Frankly, his book was not popular enough for it to meet our
he's a nobody.
Quotas.
We thought he was a nobody.
Well, he is a nobody. He's just nobody with a weird cult following.
But he still has this huge cult following, and he still speaks at Exo Marriage. Dave and Ashley Willis from Naked Marriage share a stage with him, and Dave and Ashley Willis are huge. Yeah. Les and Leslie Parrott endorsed Mark Driscoll. They haven't taken that endorsement back.
As far as we know, yeah. Please, tweet them. Let them ask them.
Like, all kinds of people have still, John Piper have still supported
John
him.
Piper is not surprising, though.
No,
Let's
I know,
be
but like
honest.
they haven't taken back their endorsements. And even last month, Matt Chandler and Mark Driscoll both presented at the same conference.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, if we want, we're talking about abusers in the SBC, and if I know Mark Driscoll isn't necessarily SBC, but like if you're going to get rid of abusers, we need to start saying we're not going to platform them anymore.
Yeah.
And so if you're giving them a platform, or if you're sharing a platform with them when you could do something different, then you are actually perpetuating abuse. Anyway.
Yep. Unless you said from the stage, in essence, like, hey, I don't agree with Mark Driscoll, and I think that he's actually a bad person
Yeah.
for the gospel.
Or like, honestly, if I were asked to speak at a conference where all of the speakers were terrible, but they were letting me speak, I would. As long as I could call everyone out.
And we would not advertise it either.
Yeah. Okay. So here is a quote from Mark Driscoll. Okay. This is from a sermon in Edinburgh, and here's what he said. She, the wife, says, I've never performed oral sex on my husband. I've refused to. I said, you need to go home and tell your husband that you've met Jesus and you've been studying the Bible and that you're convicted of a terrible sin in your life. And then you need to drop his trousers and you need to serve your husband. And when he asks why, say, because I'm a repentant woman. God has changed my heart and I'm supposed to be a biblical wife. She says, really? I said, yeah. 1 Peter 3 says if your husband is an unbeliever, to serve him with deeds of kindness.
Can I just say that is one of the most disgusting, like the ways he's supposed to, like, I'm a repentant woman is so the most disgusting misogynistic power trip fetish that I've ever heard.
Yeah.
I don't even care. You can get mad at me, Mark. I don't care. I think that's misogynistic power fetish.
Yeah.
Disgusting.
Absolutely.
Situation.
But here's the thing. Okay. And I know Mark is an extreme example of this, but when we talk about oral sex, so often what we're talking about is how to convince her to give it to him.
Yeah.
Because he's the one who wants it. And so how do we convince her to give it to him?
And we see a lot of really weird kind of like conversations around this, even from more nuanced people.
Well, yeah, I was listening to a podcast by Deborah Felita and Gary Thomas, who wrote Married Sex. When the book came out, they had a podcast on oral sex, which was actually fairly well done. Okay, so they were saying, look, she has a lot more risk with oral sex. There's things that happen when she performs oral sex.
It's just more uncomfortable.
It's more. It can be more uncomfortable, and so you don't want to pressure her to do something. You never want to pressure someone to do something that's against their conscience. Mm-hmm. You always want to think about the other person. And so you don't ever want to insist, which is all very, very good.
That
was all fantastic.
It's like, great job, guys.
Here's the issue I have, though. When we frame the oral sex conversation as how, what if someone wants oral sex and the other person doesn't?
Just a fun way to spice things up.
And we frame it as an equal thing for genders. Mm-hmm. We miss out on the fact that for him, this is something fun that he might want to supplement their love life. Mm-hmm. For her, it might be the main thing.
Yeah.
Because what we found is that the majority of women do not reach orgasm through intercourse alone. The majority of women need a lot of foreplay. And the majority of women can reach orgasm easier through oral sex than they can through intercourse. So when we say that, oral sex is optional, and I do think it's optional. Mm-hmm. It absolutely is optional. But we also need to say, guys, you need to make sure she's orgasming. And when we treat it like, well, this is the same, he wants to spice things up. She wants to spice things up. She may not want to spice things up. She may just want to orgasm.
It's not about spice. It's not about turning up the heat. It's just about turning the frickin' burner on.
Yeah.
Okay,
and this is, again, where we're prioritizing his orgasm because it's assumed, everyone knows he's going to orgasm whether you perform oral sex or not.
Yeah.
She isn't. And so when we talk about oral sex, the priority shouldn't be figuring out how to make sure she's comfortable giving it to him. Mm-hmm. It should be, okay, before we even talk about this, let's make sure she can orgasm.
Yeah, let's figure out the orgasm gap.
That's the first thing we're going to talk about. Before we talk about whether we're going to have oral sex, we got to make sure, first of all, she's orgasming.
That's such an important question because making sure that we're on equal playing field mm-hmm. is one of the first things we have to do to dismantle that yes space that we've created as a culture for men.
Yeah.
It's not about focusing on him. It's not even about elevating her over him. Yeah. It's about, as a couple, making sure that you're both experiencing the benefits that you should be experiencing. And that might mean that she gets a little bit more attention. Mm-hmm. But that's not unfair because the end goal is that you are equal, right?
Yeah.
It's that idea of there's this a graphic that goes around all the time about the difference between equality and equity. right? So you have 4 people trying to watch a baseball game. One of them is 6 foot tall, one of them's 5 foot tall, one of them's 4 foot tall, and one of them's 2 feet tall.
Yeah.
Give them all the same box, and the 4 foot and the 2 feet tall people still can't see over the fence.
Right.
You give them all different boxes. The 6 foot tall person doesn't need a box. He can see. 5 foot tall needs 1 box, one foot. 4 feet tall needs 2 feet, and 2 feet tall needs a 4 foot box.
Yeah.
And you know what? Now it's actually equitable. Now they can actually see. And that's what we need to aim for here. It's not about, well, if she gets to have a 4 foot box, then I, the 6 foot tall dude, should also have a 4 foot box. No, because then you're actually 10 feet tall and the people behind you can't see anymore.
Yeah.
You don't need a box.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah. And so this is what we're saying is we need to stop centering everything on men and we just need to say, hey, both of us matter. We're not asking anyone to center it on women. We're saying let's make sure that things are fair. And that may mean, she's going to get a little bit more attention when it comes to foreplay because he's going to orgasm regardless, pretty much. She's not.
And can I say, we've heard from a lot of like different women who have figured out the orgasm piece over the years, right? And a lot of people have found that it's really hard at the beginning. And the more you learn how your body works, it does get easier too.
Yes.
So like if you're in a position where you've been married for 7 years and she's never had an orgasm, put in the work.
Yeah.
You know, figure it out. But it's probably not going to take, like maybe it might take an hour and a half for the first time she orgasms of like intense tantric foreplay, right? Yeah. Whatever, you know, do your thing. But it's unlikely to take an hour and a half every single time. It likely is going to get easier and easier. And so after you guys have figured out a good rhythm, then you can talk about ways to spice things up, ways to try new things, you know. Maybe that even helps on her orgasm journey. You don't know. Try out stuff. But the problem is just that we have to make sure the goal is not that he has sex where he doesn't have to be disappointed that it wasn't 100%. That's all I'm saying is the goal for the couple needs to be that both of you are getting to the same place.
Yes. And this shouldn't be rocket science.
It shouldn't be rocket science, but that's why it's inappropriate to tell men, you know, just use her makeup brushes. It's inappropriate to tell men, as long as you bring home dinner on Fridays, then she'll finally have sex with you. You know, like and I know that's an oversimplification. I do know that's an oversimplification. The problem is that I'm reading these things, thinking about the effect that it has on the women in those marriages. How does this affect the woman whose husband is not thoughtful because he hasn't ever learned that he has to be? He's not considerate and he ruins her things. And maybe he does want to use her things in bed and that makes her feel gross. And she's like, I don't want to. Yeah. Can she say no after reading this? Can she say no when she's married to someone who's been raised in an environment that's teaching him he only ever gets to hear yes?
Yeah. I want to leave with the conclusion to married sex because I think this summarizes a lot of the problem. So at the very end of the book, Gary Thomas is talking about how, yes, we shouldn't talk about obligation sex.
Yes, which he does not cite.
He does not cite us. But anyway, we shouldn't talk about obligation sex. We all know obligation sex is wrong, but at the same time, sex should feel like a sacrifice sometimes. And it gives the example of getting up in the middle of the night to feed a newborn. So he explains, first of all, how women or how the low libido spouse, which he's been portraying mostly as women, might need to sacrifice. And he talks about how, you know what, if you need to prioritize sex, you need to have more sex. Like this should be something that you're willing to do. And then he turns to husbands and how are they supposed to sacrifice? So women sacrifice by having more sex that they don't necessarily want. And men sacrifice, are you ready? By thinking about what his wife is feeling and how he can make her feel better. And he recognizes her natural fears and reassures her of her beauty. He knows she has limited energy, so he does his best to help out. He empathizes with what she's feeling, with the children pawing at her all day. So basically he does the bare minimum of what a decent human does.
And I'm sorry, I know you're skipping this line. I want to read this one.
Okay.
He is able to say life isn't easy for you, so he seeks to make it a little better, to help ease her concerns rather than add to her burdens. A little better. Why a little?
Yeah.
It's such a small thing, but this is something where it's a little better. Connor doesn't try to make my life a little better. He tries to make it better.
Yeah.
I don't try to make Connor's life a little better. Connor, you would have been at a 4 without me. I'd love if you could make it to a 5.7.
Yeah.
No, I want him to be a 10.
So the way that he sacrifices is he makes sex good. He makes sure that sex is pleasurable for her. And he reassures her about her beauty, and he tries to help out a little bit around the house. So these are all things that he should be doing anyway.
Yeah.
These are not sacrifices.
Yeah.
These are things he should be doing anyway.
And she should be prioritizing sex anyway as well.
Right.
But
yes.
the problem is that these are not things that are sex related.
Right.
So we're talking about sex life.
And then we get into the sex. He says this. He says, some wives who read this may think that means he needs to be leaving me alone. But does it?
Perhaps at times, but if God designed you to be desired by your husband, adored by your husband, celebrated by your husband, and sexually pleased by your husband, wouldn't sexual compassion motivate him to adopt an approach that allows him to accomplish this in a way that you find inviting and exciting? Now, here's the thing. I don't have a single problem with telling people you were designed for pleasure.
Yep.
I do have a problem with telling women they were designed to be their husband's object of sexual pleasure.
Yep.
And this is, again, a yes space issue.
Yeah, and so he goes on and on about the way that men sacrifice is by doing what they should be doing anyway.
Yeah, which is not a sacrifice.
Which is not a sacrifice. And then making sure that you have the kind of sex that your wife wants. That, again, is not a sacrifice. So women are supposed to sacrifice, but men are not. And we actually can talk ourselves out of why men don't have to sacrifice. Like, it really is a problem. Now, I am all for prioritizing the sex life. I am all for creating a sex life which is mutual, pleasurable for both, intimate, like, absolutely. And if you've been having issues with orgasm, get our Orgasm Course. It really can help take you through all of this. We go into even how to reach orgasm during intercourse. We have a module on that because I know a lot of women are like, well, finally I can reach orgasm through manual stimulation, but I really want the other too. And so we can help walk you through those things. But so much of this stuff is really the key. It's understanding that sex is for both of you, that this isn't a yes space for men and you just kind of need to work really, 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 really hard and try to catch up without him ever having to sacrifice. No, that's not it. It's that you both need to work at this together, prioritizing you. Yeah. If you're the one who's not reaching orgasm, you get to be the priority. And I really think we can get there. I really think we can get to a place where men and women both enjoy sex and both want sex, but we're not going to get there unless we address the fact that we have created a marriage and a sex life, which is basically a yes space for men, where women are always catering to them. And that's a problem. So thank you for letting us rant.
Yep.
It was fun. It was fun just to have a normal conversation again.
I know.
Yes, we might do a few more of those this summer. Thank you for joining us on the Bare Marriage Podcast. Pretty soon we will be at baremarriage.com.
Yes.
So that transition will hopefully happen really soon. We're excited about that. So if you suddenly see my name change on Facebook and my name change on the blog, that is why. So we're transitioning over to baremarriage.com because we want to strip away all the bad marriage advice and get to the heart of what God really wants. Remember, you help us so much when you leave a review for this podcast, for The Great Sex Rescue, our book where we are trying to right this wrong and balance out the scales a little bit. It helps us tremendously. When you give The Great Sex Rescue to pastors or to friends and help them stop seeing sex as such a male entitlement and a female obligation and instead see it as a celebration that you both experience together, I think we can change that conversation for the church. I think it is changing for the next generation. I'm excited to see that happen. And so thank you for being part of this movement, and we will see you again next week. Bye-bye.